Hello, everyone. Greg Crabb here with 10-8 Cyber and with my dear colleague, Andrew McCabe.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here with you, and always good to be here with you, Greg. Greg and I are, in addition to being partners in 10-8 Cyber, we are longtime friends and neighbors. We've been helping each other solve the problems of intelligence and law enforcement and chasing bad guys of all sorts for many, many years, and now we're happy to be here and bringing those skills to you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for taking the time out of your very busy CNN schedule to
Sure, it's my pleasure.
To sit with me and talk about a very important topic, I think, for financial institutions and critical infrastructure owners, and that's current threat intelligence relative to cyber. We see just increasingly sophisticated attacks from Russian organized crime gangs like Crabb ransomware to what's going on with China, and you always have to be looking out for the insider.
You cannot be too careful. The threats that you mentioned are just kind of the tip of the spear. We see more coming at us from state-sponsored actors every day. It is tough for CEOs and for business professionals to try to keep their finger on the pulse of every threat stream, of every piece of intelligence that's coming their way. So what we try to help them do is focus on those things that are most important to know now to protect your assets going forward.
Yeah, and we're here to talk really about a discipline that you implemented in the FBI, and that was the daily director's brief for Director Mueller. Look forward to diving into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it was really the basis, the foundation of our understanding of how to execute our mission every day. We started every day the same way with a understanding of current intelligence and how that overlaid against our strategies, our understanding of our environment and what we needed to do. And it was really without that direction, we would not have been nearly as effective as we were in meeting our national security goals particularly.
Andrew, the director's brief, it was a daily routine. What did it consist of, and why is it so important for the organization?
So great question, Greg. The director's brief, the FBI director's brief on for national security issues was something I became familiar with as soon as I went to headquarters in 2006. Never experienced it anyplace else. And in those days, our approach to the brief wasn't quite as highly evolved as it ultimately became. So the FBI was so focused on the threat coming to us from terrorist actors that they would every morning sit down, the most senior leaders of the organization would sit in the director's conference room and go over what we talked about as the threat matrix, literally a listing of every threat stream, every piece of intelligence that had come in the last 24 hours. And by parsing through that over the course of an hour, we would ultimately all be given assignments depending on what role we were playing and which folks that we were overseeing. It was broad. It was using muscle instead of our brains quite as effectively as we could have. We approached it with the perspective of just doing everything. Over time, we realized that a more refined, strategic approach to that information was what we needed. So ultimately, by the time I left the FBI in 2018, the director's threat brief was lean, mean, effective, and strategic. It was very important to us to become a strategy-led, intelligence-led organization. So you have, again, an assembly of the most senior leaders on the national security side. By the end of the briefing, we've all seen the latest intelligence on the actors that are most significant to the institution and to the nation. We are up to date on what they're doing and how we need to protect ourselves and the nation from those activities. And people walk away from the brief with specific instructions to execute. And that's essential to maintain that level of accountability, because the next day you are likely to be asked by the director how you had handled a particular issue that had come up the day before.
Very interesting, Andrew. I think a lot of organizations are challenged with cultivating that proper intelligence for their organizations. And I can't tell you how many times I had been presented cyber intelligence that, well, just for prosperity's sake, we're going to tell you this, but it's really disorganized, doesn't have business context. It's not valuable to the organization. So I think the lessons that you're sharing relative to really curating that content that's really most specific to national security is so critical. And getting the buy-in from executive leadership as to really what their priorities are from a cybersecurity perspective. CEO, the CIO, everyone involved in the upper ranks of an organization really need to be involved in what is the priority intelligence that they need in order to be able to make proper decisions.
That's absolutely right. You have to know yourself first. What are the things that you need to protect? What are the resources you have to work with? And what are the gaps? What's the information that you don't have but you need to conduct that essential protective mission? With that understanding, you can set requirements, which is what you give your collectors to go out and assemble the information you need to protect yourself and your organization. And that's when the profitable intelligence starts coming back to you. You can make those moves that are necessary to always stay one step ahead of the threat actors.
So, Andrew, trying to figure out how do we get into this threat intelligence game? I mean, actors, capabilities, there's so much there.
It's tough.
Where do we start?
It is tough. And once you have an organization that's committed to better understanding intelligence, the next question is, okay, how? What direction do we go? There's a limitless well of tools and information that you can draw upon. What are the things that are most important to your business? We face the same struggles in the FBI. Our mission was protecting America and upholding the Constitution. So maybe very different than some of the private sector entities that you and I deal with today, but in some ways very similar. We suffered from the same pressures and restrictions that all large organizations do. And that is we were challenged by a lack of resources, a lack of funding, and an expanding mission set that was constantly drawing our attention in different directions. In an environment like that, Greg, it is absolutely essential to prioritize your intelligence needs. You have to go into that intelligence game understanding what's most important for you to protect, because you can't do everything, so it's unbelievably important to make good, smart decisions in a prioritized way.
Andrew, all great points for any cybersecurity leader. Lack of funding, lack of technical personnel in order to be able to do the mission, lack of really having that prioritized set of assets and data that the organization depends on.
How about struggling to keep up with technological advances? Whole Pandora's box there.
Exactly. And coming up with real-time actionable threat intelligence to safeguard the organization is a challenge.
That's right. You've got to know what's most important for you to protect. And with that understanding, you go into those threat intelligence waters in the directions you need to be going, not just swimming blindly in the night.
Andrew, once we've prioritized our assets and developed our priority intelligence requirements, what's a briefing like? What was a day in the life of a briefer? And what did they cover from a content perspective?
Well, I can tell you those are long days for the briefers. They spent a lot of time putting those things together. But the briefings really focused on three areas. We looked at incidents, we looked at actors, and we looked at vulnerabilities. Incidents were first because, terrorist attacks around the world were something we always looked very closely at. Why? Because we thought they were a great model as to what we could expect here in the United States. So if it's a hotel bombing in Pakistan, or it's an embassy that's attacked somewhere else, somewhere in North Africa, those all provided models to us as to how we would protect against those things in the event they hit us here. Actors was the second big category, and those were the folks that we were constantly keeping one eye on. Obviously, your big terrorist actors, Al-Qaeda and all the affiliated groups, were a large focus of our activity, but the nation-state actors as well. And those nation-state actors will not surprise you. It was Russia, China, Iran, and then some others. And, those are the same folks we're still worried about today in cyberspace. So some things never change. And then finally, vulnerabilities. What were those things that we felt were the most likely to be attacked by our adversaries? In the terrorism realm, it was typically transportation. We knew that attacking Western or Western-bound transportation, airliners, trains, buses, whatever that might be, remained a major goal of the largest, most lethal terrorist actors. So that was something we always focused on. And pieces of threat intelligence relative to transportation were always high on our list to focus on.
Well, I got wound up with you in protecting the Postal Service
That's
from a
right.
transportation
That's
perspective against those same actors, and really learning from incidents. So relevant to cybersecurity, because it really boils down to making sure that you understand who's getting attacked from a incident perspective, and how do you protect yourself from that attack.
That's right.
And then, as you mentioned, threat actors. The big four are always a challenge for any cybersecurity professional.
Absolutely. You've got the same nation state actors, and then you have the criminal actors, right? Your ransomware gangs, other various Eastern European and other foreign-based actors, sometimes acting with the consent or at the direction of state-sponsored groups. So it's a very, very dense group of actors that are necessary for cyber folks to keep track of these days.
Absolutely.
Okay, Greg, so let me ask you. You built a threat intelligence program for a very large organization, the U.S. Postal Service. With that threat intelligence program, how did you know what to focus on initially?
It really came down to risk management, Andrew, and really understanding the business impact that a threat actor or their tactics and techniques could have on my organization. Really looking at the financial impacts, the reputational, the operational impacts that an attacker could make to harm my organization. And I think that applies to any critical infrastructure organization.
So once you knew an actor's intent and capability, then you apply it to your own system to say, what is the business impact that I might be facing from this particular actor? Are they going to am I going to deny me funds, or negatively impact my customer base, or stop my operations?
Exactly. And it really then led me to the next question is, do I have the technical infrastructure that's getting targeted by this actor?
Right.
And that involves really knowing your technology assets and modeling them. Creating those threat models from a blueprint perspective, understand how can that threat present an issue to that particular web service or that database, or from an infrastructure perspective, really understanding the controls that we had in place to do identity and access management or encryption of our databases, and making sure that we were locked down tight to address that particular actor's.
So in other words, having the ability to kind of dial up and back the level of protection and security that you're applying to that business infrastructure on an attack and vulnerability basis.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, Greg, so we've talked about a lot of stuff here today. And basically, effective security professionals know that they need to tap into the most relevant intelligence to ensure their business success. We've talked about the benefits of developing a regular threat intelligence briefing process. We've talked about the necessity of understanding what it is you have to protect, and then executing that security strategy against your architecture. So how do they get started?
Great points, Andrew. We need to encourage you to take action. We need to start implementing these practices in our organizations. We need to stay vigilant and proactive in this ever-changing threat landscape. From creating an intelligence practice to threat modeling or assessing and managing controls, we're here to help.
That's right.
From a consulting perspective, 10-8 can come in and help your practitioners improve their practice of threat intelligence, or we can help you brief your board or your leadership team about the changing threat environment that you face as an organization.
No question. We are 10-8, which everyone in the law enforcement community knows means in service, and we are here to be in service with you. So whether it's evaluating your program, helping you with the technical side of what you're doing day-to-day to protect your organization, or simply communicating your security position, your security and resource needs to your board, to your CEO, to your decision makers, we are here to help.
Outstanding. And I encourage you to use the link below in order to set up a 30-minute free consultation with me. If Andrew's available, he'll join in, but I have trouble pulling him sometimes from CNN. But thank you, Andrew.
News is always breaking, but I'm always here to help you, my friend. So thanks for having me, and I hope this has been helpful.